Have you ever asked yourself the question, what am I? Well, if you're watching this video, you're probably human, but what are we really? It feels like we're this puppet master which sits behind our eyes and controls all of our thoughts and actions. We have memories of the past and hopes for the future, all of which we use to describe as ourself. But to go back to the original question of, what am I? It brings us to the very simple yet mysterious answer. We are consciousness. Okay, yes, we are consciousness, but then, what is consciousness? People have been asking this question since the very beginning of time, and I assume because you clicked on this video, you have also asked yourself this question. And if that's true, then I'm glad you're here, because in this video, we will be answering the question, what is consciousness? But we will be doing it from a new scientific lens. Not only that, but this will be part one of a mini-series here on the channel where we will be covering the latest scientific studies on consciousness and how we plan to use it in the fields of medicine and artificial intelligence in the future. So without wasting any more time, let's get right into answering the question, what is consciousness? Consciousness can be defined as the emergent experience of cognition. Okay, what do we mean by cognition? Well, cognition is defined as the mechanisms by which animals acquire, process, store, and act on information from the environment. These include perception, learning, memory, and decision-making. Okay, so according to this definition, what can we consider to be a conscious being? Plants, for example, are able to process information and make decisions based on data acquired from their environment. Therefore, plants do indeed have a conscious experience. Matter of fact, every living being, from the largest blue whales to the tiniest single-celled bacteria, have their own unique conscious experience. But what makes the consciousness of a cell, say, different than the consciousness of a human? Well, it all has to do with what kinds of things an organism may find itself thinking about. For example, the thoughts and concerns of a cell are widely smaller in scope than the thoughts and concerns of a human. Dr. Michael Levin, a biologist and computer scientist who has spent a great amount of time thinking about this, has developed a model to help visualize the different levels of cognition, and by extension, the different levels of consciousness. In his model, he classifies the different levels of consciousness based on how deep an organism is able to think in time and space. Here is the visual diagram of Dr. Levin's model. You can see time plotted on the z-axis, and space is plotted radially on the xy plane. This plot of space-time is what Dr. Levin calls the cognitive light cone. The cone represents the extent of what an organism is able to feel stressed about. And stress in this example refers to a very specific definition. Dr. Levin defines stress as the difference between an individual's goal state and their current state. So, in essence, this diagram shows us how complex an organism's goals can be. Let's take a look at some different organisms and see what their cognitive light cone might look like. Here we have examples for a tick, dog, human, and theoretical artificial intelligence. The tick doesn't really have any goals that it needs to think very deeply about. Since a tick survives entirely by waiting for an animal to brush up against it, it doesn't need to be capable of memory, nor does it need a great awareness of its surrounding environment. Therefore, as a result, we can see that it has a relatively small cognitive light cone. But things get a little more interesting when we look at a more complex being. In this case, a dog. Dogs, as you can see here, have a pretty good memory of the past. They recognize people, other animals, places, and vocal cues for things like treat or walk. Beyond that, they also have behavioral awareness that is shaped by memory. This allows them to form bonds of trust and love. but it also enables them to be capable of trauma and distrust. All of this really demonstrates how smart dogs can be, but are they really able to think about the future? The consciousness of a dog is constrained to living in the past and present. However, humans, for better or worse, are able to experience the past, present, and future. We are able to be stressed over things that have happened many years ago and also many years to come. Similarly, now that we have the internet and the ability to connect with people all over the world, we are able to set goals that exist on a global scale. But is it possible to go bigger? Could a conscious organism experience a wider range of both time and space? The answer is, of course, yes. This hypothetical consciousness could be some sort of alien or possibly a future artificial intelligence. So now that we understand how consciousness is ranked and classified, we can begin to talk about how these different levels of consciousness interact with each other. Earlier, we briefly talked about the consciousness of a cell. Well, our bodies are made up of trillions of cells. Does that mean we contain trillions of little conscious entities within us? According to this model, the answer is in fact yes. A good way to conceptualize how all of these individual cells work together to create our conscious experience is to think of them as workers in a business. In a large corporation, there are many specialized jobs which need to be done in order to keep everything running. Cells are like the bottom level workers who complete all the manual labor in a company. But what good is a worker if they don't know what job to do? In fact, this is virtually how all cells begin. Nearly all cells begin as stem cells, which are like base model cells without any specific job. They later turn into specialized cells when they receive a signal to do so from the greater cell network. This cell network is like the next level of management within this hierarchy of cognition. Single cells do have their own conscious experience. However, once they're a part of a group and start communicating and sharing resources with each other, a new level of consciousness emerges. This level of consciousness consists of the collective intelligence of all the connected cells. And collective intelligence is the emergent intelligence that forms when beings of a lesser intelligence work together. The goals of a collective intelligence prioritize the well-being of the community over the well-being of the individual. This enables a collective intelligence to form larger, more complex goals. Suffice to say, the cognitive abilities of a collective intelligence allows it to be considered as a separate conscious entity from the individual. Based on this premise, let's take a look at this diagram which displays the many systems of collective intelligence that are currently working together within our bodies. At the lowest level of biological cognition, we have gene networks. They are located at the bottom because they exist even in the simplest biological organisms. These organisms are known as prokaryotes. They are single-celled organisms which don't even have a nucleus, so all their cell functions are controlled by the gene network. As a quick aside, because I think it's very interesting, prokaryotes are thought to be the first life forms here on Earth, so of course it would make sense that they are the lowest level of cognition and consciousness. Next up is the cytoskeleton. This comes into play with eukaryotes because they have a nucleus and organelles. And for those of you who may not know, organelles are like the tiny organs of a cell, like the mitochondria, for example. While the nucleus and organelles can't just float around anywhere, they need structure and connection. The cytoskeleton provides this structure and acts as a road network through which both resources and information can move around the cell. Okay, but how do we know that this skeleton is conscious? Well, that is due to its ability to store memories of the past, communicate both intra- and intercellularly, and solve problems when the cell is faced with threats both internally and externally. These qualities of memory, communication, and problem solving are present at each subsequent level of cognition, with each level building upon the intelligence and cognition of the previous levels. Stuart Hameroff, an anesthesiologist and researcher into consciousness, describes these levels of conscious experience as a fractal pattern, where each level both builds on those below it and supports those above it. If you'd like to see examples and experiments done that demonstrate the consciousness and cognitive abilities of these gene networks all the way up through group intelligence, consider leaving a like and subscribing, as I will be doing a part 2 to this video highlighting all the recent and ongoing research into building this new understanding of consciousness. Lastly, before I end this video, I would like to mention how this model of consciousness lines up nicely with ancient Eastern philosophies. The idea that stress is the difference between one's current state and one's goal state is reminiscent of the idea that desire is the root to all suffering. And the answer to removing all desire, suffering, and stress from our lives is to live fully in the flow of the now. Thank you all for watching. If you happen to be in the future, then the next part of the series should be appearing on your screen somewhere around here. Again, leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed, and let me know down below, what do you think consciousness truly is? But that's it for the video today. Until next time, guys, stay curious.